So for the next three daf, approximately, we're going to almost exclusively be dealing with, well, not exclusively, other side subjects come in, but as always in Gemara, but we're going to be dealing with the concept of asay halus asay and the halachas that revolve around it. And the introduction to that, the Gemara is going to be asking, what do I need a pasuk for in the drash and all the halachas here? We have, if not for this, I would say, my time, and I'm reading asay asay v'dechalus asay. I would, because if not for the Torah saying you cannot do yibum on an erva, I would have said, oh, I can do a yibum on an erva. Why would you do a yibum on an erva? The Gemara says, because as asay asay v'dechalus asay, I have a positive mitzvah, and that can doiche a los asay. Now, we're going to see that even though that this is a los asay sheyesh bekares, and generally we say that a positive commandment, a mitzvah asay, cannot be doiche a los asay. Sheyesh bekares. Sheyesh bekares. And also, a los asay sheba mikdash. When the Torah says not to do something in the Beis HaMikdash, that too is more severe, it's more chamor, and therefore lo asi asay v'dochal lo asay sheyesh b'kares, or lo asay sheyesh sheba mikdash. However, over here it's going to be different, and I would have said that the asay can be docha, and therefore I need a drash. So before we get to here, I want to just unpack the concept of asay dochal lo asay a little bit. There are two possible ways of looking at this. I have a mitzvah asay. The Torah says, in this case, yibum. The first case the Gemara is going to give us is the mitzvah of tzitzis, putting tzitzis on my four-corner garment, on my dalet kamfos. Any mitzvah I have a mitzvah mila on Shabbos, on Yontif. I have a mitzvah of dalet minim. Any mitzvah I have a mitzvah asay, but it comes into direct conflict with a los asay that I have. Mitzvah yibum is in conflict with the iser erva of my brother's wife. Tzitzis, if I'm wearing a linen garment of four corners and I have to wear techelas, and techelas by definition is the blue wool. Well, I'm going to be making shatnez. I'm mixing wool and linen. Doing Mila on Shabbos. So we'll talk about all of these cases, special drushas or not, because of when they need it. But the concept is the same. I have a mitzvah asay and I have a los asay that is in contradiction. Do I now say asay dochal los asay, and there's no longer a prohibition? The lav is set aside. It's hutra. The language of the Gaonim is the Torah never gave the prohibition. The lav was never set in this case. It's a limit to the iser. The Torah says, Eishasach, do not marry your brother's wife. The Torah says, do not make shatnez. That's not a totally broad iser. It's got a limit to it. Don't do it up until this case. But in this case, it's allowed. If you're wearing a linen garment, you're allowed to do shatnez for the sake of tzitzis. You can't do chabura on Shabbos unless you're doing mila. There it's going to be a different concept. We'll get to it, but the concept is the same. That asay dechal los asay means the los asay is not applicable in this case. That's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is actually that the mitzvah is there and the prohibition remains. And the Torah says, I want you to do the mitzvah in spite of the fact that you're going to be over an iser. And we'll see many different questions that will arise depending on the understanding of what the structure of asay dochal los asay is. And the language often used is hutra. It's permissible, it's made permissible, or dechuya, it's set aside. Is the lav, the negative commandment, hutra, actually permissible? It's not even there. Or is it a dechuya? It's permissible, it's prohibited. It's just that in this particular case, you're allowed to do it or obligated to do it. I'll give you an example of the relevance of such a question, of whether it's hutra dechuya. Somebody is ill. We know on Shabbos you have to get them help. And you can break Shabbos for that. A classic question that comes up. Somebody is ill and they need to eat meat. I have in front of me a piece of nevela, treif meat, available right here. However, I also have a kosher animal in the backyard that I can shecht. Which is preferable? Shechting, which is an Isser Shabbos, or the nevela, eating the nevela? Now, if we say all prohibitions in relation to a choila are hutra, it's permissible, doesn't make a difference. This is permissible, that's permissible, just do what you need. And he can eat the nevela. If I say it's dechuya, it's pushed aside, meaning really the prohibition is chai v'kayim. The Torah still says don't do Isser Shabbos, don't shecht on Shabbos, and the Torah still says don't eat your nevela. The simple question is only, well, I have to live by the Torah that says b'chai b'em, I have to save a life. Okay, so do it. There's a mitzvah that supersedes the prohibition, but the prohibition is still there. Then I would choose to do the shechita because it's a single act versus eating the nevela, because each time the person that's ill eats a kazayas, they've eaten another piece of nevela, and they've done they eat 5 kazesim, they've eaten 5 isurim, where shechting is only 1. Okay, so the relevance would be the continuation of the iser. Maybe if we say it's dechuya, if we say that really the iser is still there, it's just set aside, meaning the mitzvah supersedes it, well, then I'm going to try and minimize the iser. Whereas if I say that it's hutra, it's permissible, that means there is no iser here at all. The iser does not exist. That's the question. And that's a very relevant question is going to come up for Yibum questions, and we'll see some questions on Tosfos and try and unpack it in the various mitzvahs as we go along in the next 3 daf of this concept of Aseh de Chalosaseh, where it applies, where it doesn't. So I told you the Gaonim. This is Rav Hai Gaon, Rav Shrir Gaon, Rav Nissim Gaon, various different versions of the same concept. They hold, and this is the Gaonim of Bavel, they hold that the Isser is actually not applicable in this case. When the Torah gives you a mitzvah, the prohibition that the Torah gave was limited to all cases besides for this. So let's take the classic case, the top of Daf Dalet. The Torah says, L'sil b'shatnez, don't wear a mix of wool and linen together. Gedilim ta'aseh lacha, and you should put tzitzis, what we call tzitzis, gedilim, on the corner of your 4-corner garment. So the Torah is saying the limit to l'sil b'shatnez is limited. Don't wear shatnez unless it's for tzitzis, or in fact, or for Big Day Kahuna, right? That means it's not that the Torah gave you a prohibition and then allows you to supersede that prohibition. The prohibition is not there. The prohibition, the Isser, the Lav, is limited to a standard case. But in the case of tzitzis, there is no Isser. Okay, that's the way those Rishonim, the Gaonim, learn. The Ramban, let me just give you the source on that. The Ramban is in the Chumash, in Shemos Chaf, Perek Chaf, Pasuk Ches. The Ramban asks, what's the basis for Aseh Dochalos Aseh? Why is it that a mitzvah Aseh supersedes a mitzvah Aseh? It says a wonderful insight into Torah. We have mitzvahs, our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hashem wants us to do things in order to connect to the Kedusha of the world and to Kedusha that Hashem gives us, and the Torah is there for that purpose. Our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu can have 2 primary avenues. One of ahava, of love, and out of love you do and you care, and it's a proactive drive, and fear. Fear is a suppressant. Fear is a limiting factor. So it says generally a mitzvah aseh, is a drive. It's a mitzvah out of ava to do for Hashem. And a mitzvah lo saseh is something that is suppressing. It's a lo saseh it's saying, don't transgress. Be afraid of what the ramifications are. Not for punishment from Hashem, not that afraid. Afraid of breaking the barriers. Afraid of, like, in the sense of you don't want to make a noise because you're afraid to wake up the neighbor. Not because of the repercussions, just because it's not right. But it's not out of a love, but much more out of a fear. So the mitzvah saseh is out of ava, and we know the relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the avoda of serving Hashem out of ava, is greater than out of yira, and therefore an aseh is docha lo saseh. That's the Ramban. It's a beautiful vart, and there are many questions to be asked. So, why not in the Beis Hamikdash, and why not for a lo saseh sheish b'kares? What's the meaning of the definitions? But this vart seems to indicate that the prohibition is still there. If the prohibition is not there anymore, then it doesn't show that love supersedes the avoda of ava is greater than the avoda of yira. It just, the yira is not there. There is no lo saseh anymore. The Torah never gave the prohibition in that case, the way the Gaonim say. From the language of the Ramban, even though it's more of a musar, of a chassidish warm vart, right? It's not a technical lumnus vart, but we can see the concept that he understands, that you have a present aseh and a present lo saseh in front of you, and the Torah says, use ava, let the aseh supersede the lo saseh. And so we see in the Ramban that he perceives it not in the way that the Gaonim say, that there's a limit on the lo saseh, and the prohibition was never said in such a case, but rather that they're both present. The mitzvah saseh and the mitzvah lo saseh are present. Shabbos prohibition is present, and the Torah says, I still want you. Life is more important. I want you to break Shabbos for the sake of saving a life. Not, there is no prohibition of Shabbos. It's prohibited, and you're breaking Shabbos, but I want you to break Shabbos because of supersedes it. And that's this idea. Tzitzis supersedes the prohibition. It's not that the prohibition is not there. The lav is there. The lo saseh is there. And still, I want you to supersede that. That's the way the Ramban perceives that. And there's a lengthy tshuva in the Ma'arik who has many arguments to prove this idea that really the lav is still present, and the aseh is the lo saseh. So it's a dechuya, it sets it aside, it supersedes it, and not that it suspends it. It's not that there's a suspension of the lav, but rather it's here, but the aseh supersedes it. So those are we'll use the language of suspending the lav, hutra, versus superseding it. It's still there, but dechuya. And this is going to show up a lot. It's some of the halachas that are relevant for an aseh, is that it has to be bi'idnei. It has to be at the same time. I cannot do a transgress a prohibition now because later I'm going to have a mitzvah that's going to come into place. So a question that comes up is, for instance, I'm wearing tzitzis at a time that I'm not obligated in tzitzis. So let's say Laila Lavzman tzitzis. Okay, so we know that there's a machlokas of when we say Laila Lavzman tzitzis, so we're talking about a nighttime garment, even during the day, or any garment during the nighttime. Once it's dark out, I'm not obligated. But we know that Laila Lavzman tzitzis. Tzitzis is a day mitzvah, not a night mitzvah. Can I wear my linen daled canvas, my linen garment, with the techeles, wool techeles in there, right? No, techeles by definition is wool, and I'm wearing it b'shadas, but I'm wearing it at night. Now the answer is going to be no. It's not the time of the mitzvah. It's not the time of the mitzvah. So maybe if we get a chance on Thursday, we'll talk about the Shitas Rabbeinu Tam, who says that there is such a thing that even not in the time, but when it is the same mitzvah that continues. I want to get into that right now. But generally, the concept is it has to be at the same time. You cannot have break a lav now for a mitzvah that's going to come later. At the time of the mitzvah, and I have a mitzvah to do, and at that very time there's a lav, I'm allowed to do it. So that's one. Another is going to have to be that I don't have another way to do it. It's efshar l'kayim shneim. I cannot do both. But if I can do both, then I'm obligated to do them separately. That's a general thing. But there's a limit to that as well. Because we have a simple question. If it's true that aseh is only docha los aseh, the positive commandment is only going to supersede the negative commandment, if it's at the same time and I don't have a way out, well, I have a way out. You have a four-cornered linen garment, just round one corner. And then you're not mechuyev in tzitzis. Or don't wear that kind of garment. Only wear wool garments. Only wear cotton garments. Only wear something else. Don't wear a linen garment, which is going to obligate you into the mitzvah. You have a way out. So what we have to understand is that avoiding the mitzvah is not a way out. What we mean when we say that it has to be that you cannot do both, that you cannot do them separately, is where I can actually do this and I could do that. I can do the mitzvah and still guard the prohibition. But if your answer is just don't do the mitzvah, or avoid the mitzvah, or circumvent the mitzvah, that's not going to count as you efshar l'kayim shneim. It's possible to do them separately. You don't have to transgress. I do, because I cannot wear a linen garment with four corners and not wear techeles. So therefore, I'm going to by necessity have to have the shatnez. Yes, it's true. I don't have to wear a linen garment. And yes, it's true. It doesn't have to have four corners. But those are skirting the issue. Those are avoiding the mitzvah aseh. That's not the possibility of doing the aseh without transgressing. Does that make sense? So that's fundamental to the mitzvah aseh. That you have the aseh is going to be derech aseh unless you have a way to do them separately, but you have to be able to do the mitzvah, do it, not avoid it, not avoid the transgression. To do the mitzvah and to still keep the los aseh. And if not, this aseh is going to be docha the los aseh. It's going to supersede it. Now, whether the word simply docha means supersede, or it's suspending, meaning the lav doesn't even apply. We're going to see a little bit more about that. That's Shem on Thursday. Another concept that Tosfos brings up, and there's a question comes on: what happens if there are multiple isurim? So I have a aseh, a mitzvah to do, and I have two transgressions. Does one aseh supersede two transgressions? So aseh derech los aseh does not apply to a bris on Shabbos, because Shabbos is not only a negative, a los aseh, it's also a positive. It's a aseh v'los aseh. So one positive can't supersede a positive and a negative, because that for sure is bigger. But rather, the aseh is not going to supersede there. And the same for Yantiv. Yantiv is also an aseh v'los aseh, so it cannot supersede. However, let's just imagine for a moment that the aseh of bris milah, which you're allowed to do on Shabbos from a drasha, from the pasuk, let's say it does work with the mechanism of aseh derech los aseh. Only because I want to give an example that's close to home in order to understand the point I'm bringing. So we had Shavuos, which was a Yontiv and Shabbos, and I have a bris to do. So it's true, aseh derech los aseh, aseh can supersede a negative, but there I have two. I have Shabbos and Yontiv. So maybe the aseh cannot supersede the los aseh. Where is this more relevant? Tosfos' case.
Well, was there ever los aseh on Yantiv?
Yeah, it says los aseh kol malacha, los aseh malacha. And Shabbos says los aseh kol malacha.
And Milah doesn't get the exemption for by means
Milah
of
supersedes. Yeah, but I have two. Maybe aseh can be derech one los aseh, but not derech two los aseh. That's the question. Or to bring it home to Yevomos. Gemara says that I have, if not for the Torah teaching me, aleha, by achos isha, by the wife's sister, and it says, do not marry your wife's sister, aleha. Oh, but by aleha, but by yibum, it's going to be that by yibum is going to be prohibited, even by yibum. I would have thought what? That the positive commandment of yibum supersedes the negative commandment, loisase, of erva of achos isha. So Taisa says, wait, but there's two. There's two loisases. It's your brother's wife and it's your wife's sister. It's a double. So Taisa says, from here we see that if we're going to say asay dechalosasay, it's going to supersede even two lavin, even multiple lavin. So in previous Masechtas, we saw the concept of somebody can do one thing, and in that he transgressed 5 lavin. Somebody does one thing, and he's going to transgress multiple lavin at once. Okay? Tessa says, so what? He's going to transgress the mitzvahs asay, as long as they are regular asays, the mitzvah asay is going to supersede it. So an example would be is you have a linen garment and you're wearing it together with the chelas, a shatnez, and aside from that, you have another lav because I'm trying to think of another lav that would apply. Carrying would not apply because it's a garment. Well, whatever it would be, there are 2 lavin. So that would, if there were 2 prohibitions, it would still be also. So let's say the case in Avela, okay? You didn't salt the meat, so you have blood and Avela. You have a mitzvah say that you have to save this person's life, but you have the nevela, and it's not salted, so it also has blood. Would you say it supersedes 2 lavin? Tessa says yes. Yes, it supersedes 2 lavin, 3 lavin, 5 lavin. A mitzvah asay supersedes the list asays. Now, the Mefarshim ask, in the case that I told you earlier about Shabbos, when we say it's better to shecht on Shabbos rather than to give him rather than to give the person to eat the non-kosher meat, the treif meat, the nevela. Why? Because in nevela, each time he eats, is going to transgress anew. Each kazayas is a new transgression. Whereas in the shechting, it's a single act. And since it's a single act, it'll supersede. One single act is better than doing multiple acts. And the question is asked, is that a contradiction to our tesvis? What do you say? I have in front of me either treif meat to eat or shecht, a kosher animal on Shabbos. We say shecht because that's a single act, rather than give them the nevela meat because that's going to be multiple times a lav, even though that we say it supersedes the lav, so it can supersede it 5 times. Tosfos over here says it can supersede 5 different lavin. Do you see a distinction?
Between the nevela and, well, it's
and the woman that's both achos isha and ishasach, a brother's wife and the sister.
It's the same isser multiple times versus different isurim. Is that the distinction?
Yeah, but flesh that out.
I mean, during the time period of when you have this aseh applying, then if it's the same isser, it just doesn't count as distinct transgressions of that. Not sure.
No, so I think you're saying that if you say that the transgression is removed, it's suspended, so then it's better to suspend one isser multiple times because it's just suspended. The isser doesn't apply here, versus 2 isurim and suspending 2 isurim. Why would you suspend 2 isurim? However, if you say that it's not suspending, it's just superseding, when in a single act, it's superseding at once. It's just superseding many isurim, but it's one superseding, the mitzvah superseding and doing it. Whereas if you're going to eat multiple times, each time I'm transgressing again. I'm allowed to transgress, but I'm transgressing again, and then I'm transgressing again, and then I'm transgressing again. So it's going to count as separate acts, and therefore it's going to be a new dichui, a new superseding each time, a new pushing aside the prohibition, and that's why there's going to be a difference. So Tosfos, in any case, in Tosfos over here, we have this concept of the asay can be doche the los asay, even multiple los asays as once. Taking it back to Yibum, and we're going to end with this. We saw on Daf Beis, and we discussed this then. Rashi's of the opinion that the mitzvah of Yibum doesn't supersede the los asay. Sorry?
So there's a difference between multiple of the same los asay and many different los asay, it would seem to me. Just like when we think about Av and Toldos, multiple Toldos of the same Av, they count against that, with that single Av. But if they're Toldos of different Avot, then it's multiple Averas, multiple.
Very good comparison. Very good comparison. That you see that when they're all in the one category, so that'll count as one, versus in multiple separate categories, they will be a separate isurim each time.
If I take 5 bites of pork on Shabbos, that's different than 1 bite of pork, 1 kindling of a fire, 1 weaving of a kippah or something like that.
Yes, good, very, very good comparison.
So where does it come out?
Well, where does it come out? You have Tosfos. We had that.
I mean in this situation with Ibum, are these different lavin that we're dealing with, or are they the same lav?
They are different lavin. Correct.
Okay.
The Ramban is saying, Tosfos is saying that they are different lavin, and yet it supersedes. That's the chiddush of Tosfos. Even though that I have multiple different isurim happening at once, at the same moment, because this woman is both his wife's sister and also his brother's wife, because 2 brothers married 2 sisters. So this woman is at the same time this Isser and that Isser. Tosfos says, so therefore I can transgress 2 Isurim, 2 Avos, as Aki said, and yet it'll be allowed to supersede the 2.
You probably said all that earlier, and I finally caught what you were getting at, but they were all erva, essentially. So why isn't that the Av?
Just like Shabbos, it's all malacha, but each definition of malacha is a separate malacha. So I have weaving
21,
and writing.
21 categories. We have 21 categories of erva. Each one's a different lav.
Av malacha, right? Let's say.
Av malacha.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's equivalent to each one being an av malacha.
Okay. Thank you.
So taking it back to our case of erva, of Yibum. So Rashi, we said in the first daf, Daf Beis, indicates that there's a suspension of the prohibition of Eshesach. The Torah, when it said, you may not marry your brother's wife, that's only if it doesn't apply to Yibum. But if it applies to Yibum, not only are you allowed to, you're obligated. So there is no asay docha los asay. It actually supersedes it. Tosfos, however, here at the end of Tosfos, the first Tosfos on Daf Daled, really it's at the end of the Tosfos from the previous Daf, clearly says that the mechanism of the asay of Yibum superseding or the los asay, Tosfos asks, but it's a los asay sheyesh bakares. We know that it only supersedes a simple los asay, but if there's kares punishment attributed to the los asay, then it doesn't supersede. Or a los asay shebem mikdash. If it's in the base of mikdash, it doesn't supersede. And yet over here, we have it superseding. So Tosfos doesn't answer what Rashi would have answered, which was, yeah, it doesn't work with that mechanism. It actually is not superseding it. It's simply the Torah never made the prohibition. The Isser is never said in this case. Rather, Tosfos says, oh, you know why? Because this is mitzvasa. This is the structure, the way the Torah made that particular mitzvah. This is the second narrow line in Tosfos on Daf Daled Amud Aleph. The shiny Eishes Ach, this mitzvah of Yibum, which is superseding the prohibition of erva of the brother's wife, the mitzvah sebekach. That is the structure of the mitzvah. Meaning, when do I say that the asay cannot supersede a los asay? When it, by happenstance, happens to occur together. The Torah doesn't say techeles must be put onto linen garments. Rather, the Torah says four-corner garment, you must put on tzitzis, gedilim tasalacha. And one of those happens to be, it has to be a wool, blue wool, a techeles wool string. But it can be on any garment. It doesn't have to be linen. By happenstance, it happens to be linen, the mitzvah supersedes it. That's only on a regular lisaseh. However, if the Torah specifically says, do this mitzvah on that case, then the Torah is saying, in spite of the fact that it's a lisaseh sheyesh b'kares, it's a lisaseh that has the high level punishment of kares, which tells me the strength of the lisaseh, of the negative commandment. Nevertheless, the Torah is saying it wants you to do the mitzvah sebekach. That's where the mitzvah is said, and a lot of discussion about this Tosfos concept of mitzvah sebekach. I just want to bring up a question that comes up in this case. If we understand like Rashi, we understand this woman is married to the Yavam. The mitzvah is that they need to marry. They marry. He reestablishes his deceased brother's household. And Shalom Yisrael, they can live happily ever after. There's no prohibition. But according to Tosfos, that says the mitzvah aseh supersedes the los aseh. So we have a question. When is the mitzvah done? When he does the mitzvah yibum, the first day, the first moment. After that, mazel tov, they've done yibum, the first day, mitzvah is over. What's the prohibition to continue remaining married after that? If the Isser is still there, and simply the mitzvah saseh supersedes that, so then that should, once the mitzvah is done, on day one, the mitzvah is over, and now all you're left with is the Isser, which was intact all along. So how can they remain married?
Does he become his brother since he's really taking on his brother's kiddushin? It's not like and his brother no longer exists. So
that would answer.
There really is no ach. It's not really eshes ach because the ach isn't there anymore, and he's the ach.
But then you're saying there's no Isser anymore. Tosfos is saying there's actually still an Isser.
Still an Isser, yeah.
Right. If you are right that he is totally bimkom ach, he's replaced his brother, then how can there still be an Isser? Tosfos, by saying the Isser remains alive and well, it's simply that something is superseding it. As soon as that mitzvah aseh is done, right, on day one, it's done, Yibum has been done, and now the Isser remains in place. So Tosfos himself asks this question later, not here, on Daf Ches. Tosfos asks this question on Daf Ches in Tosfos Divrei HaMaschil Melamed, and Tosfos says it's a logical conclusion. The Svaruhu, this is the fourth to last line in Tosfos there, and Tosfos says, Svaruhu, it's a logic. I don't need a pasuk for that. This is a logical conclusion. The Torah didn't give the mitzvah to reestablish the brother's household, only to prohibit her, to keep her prohibited, and that he has to divorce her. That would be ridiculous, right? So it inherent in the initial mitzvah must be the continuation of that. But the question still remains, but what's the mechanism? Fine, I understand that the Torah wills that. Rashi has a good mechanism. The Isser is suspended. According to Tosfos, we have to understand what mechanism does it use. If the Isser is still there, it's logical the Torah wants you to continue, but by which mechanism? I don't have an asay anymore, a positive commandment to supersede that. So by what mechanism does it work? I'll change the question a little the way Rav Nachum Pertzovitz asked the question. He says, how can you ever do Yibum? If the prohibition is still in place, we know that besides for the Isser Kares, we mentioned this many times already, that the halacha is Ein Kiddushin Tovsin B'chayve Kares. Everybody agrees. If somebody says Harei At Mekudeshes Li to a Chayve Krisos, it doesn't work. It's null and void. It's a non-effective Kiddushin. It's not the Kiddushin takes effect, but there's a prohibition, which is the halacha in regards to Chayve Lavin, like a Kohen to a divorcee. The Kiddushin takes effect. It's just simply there is a prohibition. By Chayve Krisos, the Kiddushin does not take effect. So how can the Yibum take effect? So there are different answers said about this. Just go with the simplest ways, that if the Kiddushin of the brother continues into he passes it over. So sort of what Joaquin was saying, that he's in place of the brother, but not he's in place of the brother, because then they wouldn't be an Isser. But rather the Kiddushin of the brother is then handed over. The Zika gives over the brother's Kiddushin into to the Yavam. And the mitzvah is for him to accept that and continue the previous brother's Kiddushin. Therefore, that brother's Kiddushin structure remains, which is the heter to remain a wife, to live together. That's the structure of the heter, meaning he's taking over, rather than him being in place of the brother, and therefore there's no Isser at all. Rather, he is himself. He is the second husband. He's the surviving brother. But the Kiddushin, the matrimony, the mitzvah, the holiness that happened at Kiddushin in the first one is what handed over to the second brother, and he's continuing that. Therefore, he doesn't need Kiddushin to be chal. He doesn't need the Kiddushin to take effect. The Kiddushin took effect way back when. He's simply inheriting that Kiddushin, adopting that Kiddushin. And therefore, his heter to remain with this woman is by the mitzvah or the initial Kiddushin that continues throughout this thing. So that's the introduction to the daf. Asay dochalos asay. In Yibum, it's even asay dochalos asay sheyesh ba kares. It'll even supersede a los asay that has kares. According to Tosfos, it's going to remain that way. Rashi says no, the mechanism actually is that it goes away. Some say every asay dochalos asay is that the Isser goes away, which we're calling it suspends the Isser, versus some say that it supersedes, and we understand that way in the Ramban, and the Marik says so clearly, that the mechanism is that the Asay supersedes, that the Isser is still there, it just supersedes it and tells you need to do it. Well, it has to be at the same time, it has to be that you cannot do it in any other way, but you have to be able to do the mitzvah. Those are the things we discussed today. Enjoy the daf. It's a wonderful daf. Oh, just one more thing. The Gemara is going to get into the concept of smuchim, juxtaposition. That when the Torah says one mitzvah or prohibition, and then immediately next to it another mitzvah prohibition, it's going to tell us a fact about each other. So, for instance, the concept of asay dochalos asay, we're learning from the fact that the Torah says, "Don't wear shatnez, put on tzitzis on your garment." The juxtaposition, the smuchin, tells me, don't wear shatnez unless it's for wearing tzitzis. That's the concept. One very relevant one for Yibum. I mentioned that in both of the previous shiurim that we had, that the Torah, in saying that the Yibum must happen, is a choice for the woman. The woman has a right to say, I don't want that guy. Like, I don't want the brother. And then this chalitza is meant to be done. Where do we learn that from? Also smuchin, because the Torah says immediately prior to the mitzvah of Yibum, the Torah says l'sachshon shor bedisho. Don't muzzle a ox when it is threshing. You have to allow it to eat, and you can't muzzle it. You can't constrain it that way. And then it says mitzvah Yibum. The Gemara says the smuchin is there to tell us that you can't lock a woman and muzzle her into something that she can't handle, that she doesn't want. So the concept of smuchin is another big part of the daf that we're going to see. Hatzlacha on the daf. We'll talk about it more depth on Thursday.